Mary was born into prosperity, but her father, a drunk, squandered the family money. Like her mother, she often suffered abuse at his hands. While her older brother Ned received an extensive formal education, Mary spent just a few years in a day school. The disparity rankled. Why should she be denied the opportunities offered to her brother just because she was a girl? She resolved, with characteristic determination, to educate herself. By the age of 25, Wollstonecraft had opened a small girls' school with her two sisters and her friend Fanny Blood. It was a financial struggle. Yet, Mary's intellectual horizons expanded. She befriended Richard Price, a Presbyterian minister, Fellow of the Royal Society, and a committed advocate of political reform. Price counted Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin among his clique of radical friends. Wollstonecraft discovered a forum for debate among this group of enlightened thinkers, grasping the opportunity to shape her own ideas. The school closed after Mary's friend Fanny died in childbirth. Wollstonecraft reluctantly took work as governess. Her employers were the Irish aristocrats Lord and Lady Kingsborough in Cork. Mary soon came to despise her mistress. In Lady Kingsborough, she saw everything she disliked in fashionable femininity, describing her as frivolous, with neither sense nor feeling. Restlessly ambitious, Wollstonecraft also yearned for the company of her intellectually curious friends back in London. After a year of quarrels and depression, she was fired. Wollstonecraft returned to London, broke and miserable, but she soon found new purpose as an author. The radical publisher Joseph Johnson agreed to publish Wollstonecraft's first book, The Didactic Thoughts on the Education of Daughters. Mary went to become a regular contributor to Johnson's new literary magazine, The Analytical Review. At Johnson's weekly dinners, Mary met and shared ideas with radical thinkers including Thomas Paine, Anna Barbauld, and William Godwin. She thrived in this vibrant intellectual circle. Mary Wollstonecraft's first book, Thoughts on the Education of Daughters, was published in 1787 by Joseph Johnson. A more equal society seemed within reach with the revolution unfolding across the Channel in France. It was the change Mary's radical set longed for. In England, the prominent politician Edmund Burke condemned the social upheaval in his conservative tract, Reflections on the Revolution in France. Mary was incensed by his writings. She quickly penned a furious defense of the revolution's egalitarian ideals, a vindication of the rights of men. This was the first shot fired in a critical war of words known as the Revolution Controversy, which would include the publication of Thomas Paine's Rights of Man a year later. Wollstonecraft had written passionately in defense of the revolution's ideals. Now she went further and claimed equality for her sex. How could true liberty and equality be achieved if she restricted to men alone? In her best selling book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, Wollstonecraft took the principles of the revolution to their logical conclusion. Wollstonecraft outlined a vision of equality between the sexes. If women were afforded the same opportunities and education, she wrote, they could contribute as much to society as men. The book made Wollstonecraft's name. Like many prominent reformers, Mary left for Paris. She was embraced by the radicals, shaping a new social order in France. The execution of Louis XVI in January 1793 swiftly dispelled her euphoria. In the terror that followed, more than 25,000 people were guillotined. Wollstonecraft despaired at the corruption of the revolution's ideals. That same year, she met the American Gilbert Imlay. Defying moral convention, they became lovers, and in 1794, she gave birth to her first child, Fanny, out of wedlock. The relationship proved both short lived and devastating for Mary. Wollstonecraft learned Imlay was having an affair, but she was desperate to save the relationship. Imlay persuaded her to go to Scandinavia. A ship had been stolen from him by a Norwegian ship captain, and he wanted compensation. Mary was unsuccessful and returned to London to discover Imlay had betrayed her again. Distraught, she threw herself off Putney Bridge into the Thames, only to be saved by the intervention of passing watermen. This episode led to her finest literary work, a travelogue of her Scandinavian journey, told through an imaginary correspondence with Imlay. Wollstonecraft emerged from the depths of her despair and found personal happiness with an unlikely partner. William Godwin was a famous radical philosopher. Wollstonecraft first met him at a dinner held by her publisher Joseph Johnson in 1791. Godwin had attended, excited to meet Thomas Paine. Instead, Marion Godwin argued all evening and he left irritated. In 1796, with typical disregard for convention, Wollstonecraft took the lead and renewed his acquaintance. They fell in love. Although Godwin was opposed to the principle of marriage, when Wollstonecraft fell pregnant, they wed in March 1797. Wollstonecraft's husband, William Godwin, was among the foremost radical philosophers of the day. Despite being married, the couple maintained an unconventional domestic arrangement, living in two homes, communicating through notes. On 30th August, Wollstonecraft went into labor, and after about 18 hours, she gave birth to her second child, a daughter also named Mary, who went on to write Frankenstein, aged 21. But there were minor complications which the surgeon mishandled. Wollstonecraft wanted a midwife who should have known what to do, and she suffered acute hemorrhaging. Infection followed. 11 days later, Wollstonecraft died at the age of 38. Wollstonecraft died 11 days after giving birth to her second daughter, Mary Shelley. Godwin's commitment to truth led to the publication of a well meaning, if misjudged, account of Mary's life. Conservative propagandists seized upon the candid tales of her sexual history and unorthodox religious opinions. On the basis of a perceived sexual immorality, they trashed her memory. The slurs stuck. More than a century after her death, Wollstonecraft's reputation remained a stick with which to beat campaigners for women's suffrage. Today, Wollstonecraft is widely recognized as a principal architect in the fight for sexual equality, her work is still published around the world. The ebbs and flows of her reputation are inextricably tied to society's wider view of women's rights. Her rehabilitation has been championed by some of the most preeminent feminists of the 20th century: suffragist leader Millicent Fawcett and writer Virginia Woolf among them. By the time the bicentenary edition of Rights of Women was published, Mary was an established feminist icon. Today, she remains an enduring symbol of the ongoing fight against misogyny and sexual injustice.